Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the June 2021 edition of the Sydney Microsoft 365 Meetup. My name is Ken Jostling. I am the host for this afternoon's session, and joining me today to present on SharePoint Syntax, we have Andy Wright. Andy, how are you doing?
Oh, awesome. Yeah, here in Brisbane. Loving it.
Okay, so what's on the cards for today's session? First of all, we'll have a sort of up to 10-minute recap on all of the new and interesting things that are happening in the world of Microsoft 365. And I have to say, over the last few months, it's been a veritable sprinkling of delicious tidbits like brown sugar on your all bran. There's a lot of good things that have been coming out over the last few months, and it's just a question of picking the most interesting ones out of the plethora of changes that have come to the platform. We're going to spend about 50 minutes looking into SharePoint Syntax, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is an interesting way to negate those scenarios around having to fill in forms or have people manually generate meaningful information about your content. So I'm very interested to see how we can quickly leverage that kind of capability as part of information architecture. So the first interesting topic to look at is Skype End of Life. The retirement plan for Skype was announced back in 2017. So as of July 31st, it's officially dead. So what does it mean? The service will kind of continue to function for those that haven't quite migrated off the platform yet. But there are three real options for organizations. They can migrate to Microsoft Audio Conferencing, which is the Microsoft Teams audio conferencing facility. They can continue to use a third-party audio conferencing provider, or they can simply stop utilizing the service. So just to be clear, the service itself will not break. Integrations with third-party audio conferencing providers will be impacted. You'll also need to update your licensing model. So the licensing for Skype for End of Life will move on to audio conferencing provided by Microsoft. So you're going to need those audio conferencing add-ins if you really are sticking with the platform, which is generally not recommended anyway. Microsoft will support organizations that haven't yet made the transition by automatically queuing them for essentially a fast track migration option, which they will help. So they pledge support to get businesses off the platform and onto Microsoft Teams within a very short time frame. If you are currently using a third-party or dial-in numbers provided by third-party audio conferencing providers, support for that will cease to be available. So the idea of bringing in dialing information to your meeting invites, all of that will stop working. Day-to-day chatting and things like that will, as far as I'm aware, and as far as Microsoft documentation is concerned, that will continue to work. Obviously, this is for Skype for Business. It's not impacting those customers who currently run Skype server deployments, because all of that is on premises. That is not going to be impacted by this change. The next interesting update is around the sharing and presenter options for Microsoft Teams. So you'll have noticed some recent changes to the meeting view in Teams. This is the new dynamic view for Microsoft Teams. What it will do is it will arrange the elements of your meeting on the fly to optimize your viewing experience. So you'll see people's portraits and the presenting content move around on the fly as the meeting progresses. As people join, turn on video, start to speak, or begin to present in the meeting, Teams will auto adjust and personalize the layout based on what's happening. You'll also have noticed several updates to the sharing settings. What you're seeing on the screen here is an example of presenter mode. And this is our way of reenacting our fantasies of being a newsreader or a weather forecaster. There will be several layouts, as they call them. The first one, which is the overlay, is called the standard layout. It will show the speaker's video feed as a silhouette in front of the shared content. Additional modes, reporter mode and side-by-side modes, will be coming later on the year. In order to use this feature, you have to upload your presentation to Teams first. So those of you who already use presenter mode know that you have to actually stage your content before you can use the presenter mode. It's not just simply sharing your screen. The next interesting feature that is now generally available is the ability to create webinars via Microsoft Teams. So what you're attending now is essentially a live event. That is a meeting designed to go out to literally tens of thousands of people. The webinar is an extension of a live event, but it has two key differentiators. The first is that you can create an optional custom registration page when you set up the live event. So this can be branded to your company look and feel. You can ask questions and collect information from people who will sign up to your webinar. Now, the second feature is probably the most interesting and potentially the one that will be grossly underused, I think, when people start to use this. The second feature is that once you have conducted the webinar, you can offload all the information that you've collected, so the people that have registered and the information about them, you can offload that to your Dynamics 365 platform, marketing platform. So this allows organizers to manage leads and follow-ups directly out of Dynamics, and they can seamlessly transition that information in as a function of the webinar once the webinar is done. And I think that's a very, very powerful function and will certainly drive the business case to give Dynamics more exposure in general sort of day-to-day Office 365 use. The second screen there just gives you an example of the setup for the webinar, so you can see there that you can pose questions. I think that functionality is actually driven by Microsoft Forms, if memory serves. So the third update here is around task management. So I don't actually have this in my tenant yet. Really, this is an ability to create an actionable task off the back of a chat or a post. So a chat is between two people, a post is issued to a channel in Teams. You can right click or get off the ellipsis on that chat, more actions, create a task, and what that does is it will lodge an associated task in Planner and Microsoft To Do, which have kind of converged now. This feature will require you to install or activate within your team the Tasks by Planner and To Do app. So if you haven't already done so, you can go to your team settings, the apps tab, and you can search for the Tasks by Planner and To Do. Note that there are loads and loads of task apps out there, so make sure you get the right one. And that should enable that feature as and when they roll it out into your tenant. The final set of updates are around Microsoft Outlook. Most interestingly of these, there is a new board view for Outlook on the web. So just to be clear, this is not a feature that they've rolled into the app. It's kind of a new view on the calendar. So you would go to Outlook on the web, you'd switch to calendar view, and then you can see here you can switch to the board view once you're in the calendar. This provides a panel or a frame onto which you can put widgets. So by default, there'll be a calendar on the page. You can add additional widgets. So anyone who's assembled web part pages in SharePoint will be very familiar with this. The idea is you can add a widget from a predefined set. You can move those widgets around or even overlay them, and you can create, if you like, a dashboard for your team or your project or your initiative. This is actually a really, really cool feature because you can start to seamlessly integrate with things like OneNote. A good example of that is you can add notes to OneNote, and then once you're in the email composition window, it's very, very easy to lift the notes that you've put into OneNote out and paste them into, or just add them with a click into your emails that you're sending out. So think of this as a sort of control or administrative dashboard for your initiative that provides a calendar view, a tasks view. You can also set up goals and milestones as well on there. The final update is really a small feature that I think has been long in demand. So what you have here is within the Outlook desktop client, there'll be a button on the toolbar that simply says share to Teams. And what you can do is just with a single click, rather than having to forward the email to the Teams channel or anything like that, you can simply send the email message and its attachments. You have the option of including those. You can send those to a team or a channel of your choice. That will act in much the same way as emailing the channel will. The content of the email itself will appear in as a post in the channel, and the attachments will be decoupled from the email. Of course, there'll still be referential integrity, but those attachments will be stored in the document library for the team. So I think those are some pretty interesting features that have recently been rolled out to the platform. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to our speaker for today, Andy, who's going to tell us all about SharePoint Syntex. Over to you, buddy.
Really appreciate you inviting me along to this meetup. Been to a number in Brisbane. I think they're really great events to share with the community, especially exciting news coming out of Microsoft. Little bit about myself, Andy Wright. I've been working with Microsoft Technologies for many years, mainly in partner land, and yeah, a couple of months ago I joined Microsoft, which really was a sort of a dream role, and I'm a solution architect based in Brisbane, working in Asia Pacific. Those that tuned in on a meetup a few months ago with Gavin Hack, I work very closely with Gavin. What I want to cover today is SharePoint syntax. So what is it? How does it sort of fit in the overall picture? I'm going to say a little prayer to the demo gods. So I'll be doing a couple of demos just to give you like some to make some real sort of feel of how easy it is to set up and to use. And look, with syntax and with many of these other solutions, my mind's sort of constantly buzzing with practical use cases, and I've got a few to share with you, and then see how we go with time. I can sort of take you a little bit sort of behind the scenes with some of the admin, and just give you sort of a bit of an insight as to what's coming next. So look, I've been working with SharePoint, primarily SharePoint online for a good sort of 7 or 8 years. Look, and it's a really great platform. It's had its challenges. So I think those who've been involved in sort of architecting SharePoint solutions with amazing sort of metadata based functionality, I think the sort of the bit of the sort of the roadblock is around, well, how at the end of the day it's the end user that more often than not has to manually update the metadata, and the reality is sometimes that doesn't happen. And I suppose it's sort of similar thing with compliance. And when I talk compliance, I'm talking the likes of setting a retention policy for a document, and also a sensitivity label for a document. And look, things are getting better and better on different ways of applying that. I'd still sort of say traditionally sort of applying those labels at that granular document level has been quite a challenge. And look, one of the sort of areas I've always been interested in sort of automating is forms, and there's a lot of options available to serve forms within Microsoft 365, whether it's a simple Microsoft form or Power Apps. There's a lot of organizations still using what are inherently manual forms, which needs manual intervention, data entry to be able to process. So this is where SharePoint syntax is really sort of coming into utilizing AI. And when I say AI, this is kind of, I mean, those have been tracking the sort of the journey of AI through Microsoft. Many years ago, it sort of started off in research land, and then we had these sort of behind the scenes Azure cognitive services, and now progressively a lot of these sort of AI services are coming to Microsoft 365, and a lot of the sort of the complexity which traditionally required data scientists is really being sort of taken away. And
it's really machine learning, isn't it, Andy? I think that's the buzzword people use.
Yeah,
it's a model to train an algorithm based on a data set, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. And and then once you've sort of extracted that information, then how do you then sort of process that information? And we'll get into a bit more detail there. And as I say, content governance. There's certainly automation opportunities. And look, just putting this slide up because all of this ultimately can result in cost savings, which certainly could go towards a sort of a business case to be implementing this type of technology. And look, I suppose sort of traditionally I've had sort of conversations with clients of sort of like, oh yeah, SharePoint, but it's not really records management, it's not really content management. Well, Gartner very much see Microsoft very sort of squarely in the sort of the leaders of content services. So I really like some of these Microsoft twinkly videos with nice tunes. It's only 1 minute, but I'll just play
the ukulele soundtrack, right?
It's the feel.
I don't know if this one's got a ukulele soundtrack, but I'm curious.
It's good. It has no, but whistle along. So here we go.
Every day, our world moves faster. More to do, more to read, more to manage. You need to streamline to stay ahead. What if you could teach the cloud to read and organize your content, giving you time to focus on what's important? Introducing Microsoft SharePoint Syntex. Harnessing the power of the cloud, Syntex uses AI to organize your content. You can teach it to read your documents the way you do and recognize important information. Automatically tag content to find it more easily. Streamline everyday processes and tasks, reduce risk, and ensure your information is safe. Turn content into knowledge and overload into overdrive so you can get back to what's important. Syntex, content services that work the way you do.
Well, I'm feeling a lot happier. How are you feeling, Ken?
I feel all warm and fuzzy inside, and they even had people with masks at the end. I thought that was very good. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what Ken touched upon is this is machine learning, which traditionally has been this kind of almost like this black art. And to train a model, traditionally you've got to have data sets of tens of hundreds of thousands. Some of the early, for example, image recognition models. You literally you had sort of behind the scenes crowdsourced humans training the model, which clearly is not workable for a more sort of streamlined solution. So this is evolving sort of concept of machine teaching, which let you do your own research there. But to sort of summarise, rather than this data set of hundreds of thousands, it's literally, as I'll demo in a few moments, you just load up 5 or 6 examples of sort of positives and a couple of examples of negatives. In other words, these are examples of what this model is, and these are examples of what the model isn't. And then the magic of AI will do the rest for you. So those have been sort of tracking Microsoft's sort of evolution into sort of machine learning. Probably been aware of Project Cortex, which was born, I think, about a couple of years ago. I think at Ignite it was first mentioned, and the SharePoint Syntex was the sort of the first cab off the rank, and it was sort of, I say, the grandfather of Project Cortex. I mean, that was I think October of last year that was launched. But also we've got Viva Topics, which look, I mean, that's a sort of a separate separate area to go in, but just very briefly, Viva Topics is the ability behind the scenes, the machine learning trawls through your wealth of knowledge, and then for an end user, it's you just simply hover over a sort of a set of words, and it'll automatically then sort of prompt you for with associated information. So that's but getting back to Syntex. Syntex, as with many of the latest services, is underpinned by not only AI but also the Microsoft Graph, which is sort of tracking all of your activities within Microsoft. So as I mentioned earlier, Syntex is sort of focused on sort of three core benefits around the content understanding, and as I'll show you a demo in a moment. But in this example, it's it's understanding what effectively is a PDF version of a purchase order, and then has opportunities for content to automate that whole content processing. So in other words, I've received this invoice, this purchase order, I understand the details within the purchase order, but how can I then sort of automate how that purchase order is then processed? And then compliance, which I'll show you in a moment. And there's kind of two sort of fundamental areas within Syntex. One's known as document understanding and the other form processing. And I suppose that's sort of the easiest way of describing each of these is whether it's semi-structured. So in other words, it's a form. A form has structure, standard fields that the user puts in, as opposed to an unstructured document. A good example could be could be a sort of a contract. I mean, it's probably got a sort of loosely a template, but I mean the actual content of a contract may be very sort of different for each contract. And there's sort of ways that these are both the form processing and the document understanding is managed, which let's go to demo time.
I think many people will have actually led in with the form processing example, because the drawback of that obviously is that it's PDF only. So if you're throwing Word documents in your SharePoint solution, you need a way to convert them, which you can technically into PDF format as they land. But yeah, that's really OCR. It's kind of an OCR, isn't it? So it's looking at various locations within the form, seeing if data is present, and then offloading that to fields in SharePoint, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we'll give a demo of that in a moment. Now, this what I'm going to walk you through. This is actually sort of a pre-canned demo. This is around document understanding. So just to recap, this is sort of unstructured data. So look, a lot of these services, new content services coming to product, very much using I suppose what we sort of recognise. I suppose it's sort of the foundational elements of SharePoint. So for document understanding, you have a content center that you go to. It's a SharePoint site, and it's actually sort of a type of template. So a user with the appropriate access and licensing would go to a content center. I say a content center because you can, a smaller organisation might just have the one centralised content center that they manage their document understanding models. A larger organisation, so for example, this example here, you might have different content centers per department. So we just simply sort of select to create a new model. We give the model a name. In this example, it's a benefits change letter for employees, and we open up the advanced, and again, content types. been around for forever and a day, and they're and I must admit, a couple of years ago I was sort of asking the question, well, how relevant are content types moving forward? Absolutely relevant, because it underpins the functionality of syntax. So we can change, we can create a new content type, use an existing content type. The other thing to notice here, so this model, we can apply a retention label specific. So let's say benefit changes. Well, they're pretty confidential. So we want to apply a confidential retention label, and very soon you'll be seeing in this this options the ability to also apply a sensitivity label. So we go ahead and we've starting a new document model, and then all we simply do is we upload a few examples, and that literally can be 5 or 6. What we've got here is there's about 5 or 6 positives and a couple of negatives, and we upload those, and then we go through and we train the model. And it really is as simple as saying, okay, is this a benefit change letter? Yes, 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 yes. And then these are examples. We've got a couple of statement of works in here. So these are no, they're not. And look, that in itself is the AI has a pretty good understanding of it automatically works out what the sort of what the commonalities in that document are. But to further increase the confidence score, we can train it with some further what we call explanations. So here we can say benefit change letter. Well, it's always going to have a subject. A subject says benefit change notice, and then once again we go through. It's not showing this demo, but we just then go through the documents and simply point where that label is. So at this stage, we've trained the model to recognise what is a benefit change letter and what isn't, and that has a sort of there's a level of value there. But what if we could automatically extract information from that benefit change letter? And here we go through, and again, this is using SharePoint and columns, which will become apparent when we look from the end user's perspective. And we go through and we go, okay, well, I want to extract the provider name. So we go through each of the documents and go, there's the provider name, there's the provider name, there's the provider name, there's the provider name, and this is a statement of work. So it doesn't, there is no label. And then we save that, and look, there's ways of sort of further refining the sort of the explanations. So here we're going through and saying that that name is prefixed by some text, and it's also got a URL in it. So at this stage, we've defined the benefits change letter, we've defined information we want to extract from it, and now we want to use it. So it's as simple as pointing to a document library. So here we're using a document library in human resources, and in this example, blank document library, we'll upload some documents, and then practically, I'm going to be doing a live demo in a moment of another the form processing. It takes about 30 seconds or so, but in addition to the standard sort of metadata that you'd see when you upload a document, the sort of the modified by, it's auto magically via syntax worked out that this is a content type, this is a benefit change letter, and we had that linked to a content type, and it's automatically extracted the provider name and automatically defined the retention label as a consequence, and it's got a sort of a confidence score here, and this is where as with the many machine learning models, it's not recommended to sort of set and forget, but to revisit the model and sort of fine tune that, especially around the sort of the explanators, to really sort of ensure that confidence scores are high.
Couple of questions at this point, Andy.
Number
one, when I set one of these models up, can I be prescriptive around which SharePoint sites use the model, or is it used holistically across all sites on the platform, including OneDrive sites?
Yeah, great question. So you can be selective to the specific sort of sites and document libraries.
Yeah.
I think using the sort of the content type, that sort of expands expands that concept. So if you've got a content type defined in a specific site, then if that content type relates to a document model, then that will be utilized in there. And one interesting point is, I mean, those who've been sort of following content types for a number of years, we've had this concept of a content type hub, which is like the one area that you manage content types, but with Syntex, and this was only very recently released, there's this concept of, well, we've got the SharePoint hub, which I really love, and you can define a content type at a SharePoint hub. So let's say, for example, HR, I've got a number of sites all under a hub. You associate the content type with that HR hub, and then all sites in that hub will automatically receive that content type.
The other question I had was around, let's assume you deploy one of these and it starts to classify content as content's coming into the sites. Is there a view or a way in which somebody who owns the model can actually review all the content that's been classified and report on it, so that they can identify? It would be false positives, I would guess. False negatives would skip the model. It would leave them alone.
Yeah, it would be certainly. I mean, again, great question. And I'd sort of say that there's a number of ways of looking at that. I mean, from an end user's perspective, if a document came in that wasn't automatically classified as wasn't recognized as a content type, then it would just come in as a standard document content type. And you could, and I think the overall message with Syntex is not to look at it just isolated as syntax, but also what you can do to sort of automate it, because you could, for example, have automation that, if a sort of a document came in that wasn't auto recognized as that content type, then maybe you could define a sort of a Power Automate to then notify the appropriate people. And then the other way of looking at managing your sort of overall models is within the content center. There's sort of this evolving sort of granular sort of reporting which is available there. Cool. So what I'd like to show you next is the form processing. Now this is a live demo, so let's give it a go. So I'm in I'm in a SharePoint site, and I'm just going to create a new document library. And what we can see when we go up the sort of the top here, we've got sort of Power Automate, we've got AI Builder, which I'll just recap in a moment on this. And then we've got this choice of create a model to process forms. So let's just call this one Handy Forms. And again, we've got this option to define it against an existing content type, or we can create a new content type. What it's doing now is it's taking me to AI Builder, which in this instance it's taking me to the AI Builder interface within Power Apps. And just take a few moments just to come through. Whilst that's defining, I'll just sort of recap what AI Builder is in the context of Power Apps. It's this ability to be able to in itself create sort of machine learning based sort of models. So let's say you've got an application, and it could be as simple as an application to take a photo of a business card reader and a business card, and then read the OCR from there. So this is a really simple. So I'm back in AI Builder, and I've got a set of I think there's a set of invoices, and all I want to do is it's probably about 5 or 6 fields I'd want to extract. But let's just keep it simple, and let's just extract one field. And then what I'm going to do is again similar to very similar to the document understanding. All I need to do is to give it say 5 or 6 initial examples of a form. So these are sort of PNG forms. Let's just upload a few more. Okay, so train. Right, so we're going to select 5 of those, and we'll load those. And just kind of doing a sort of a first pass, just to understand what they are. We'll close that down, and then it's analysing. So what it's doing here is it's doing a bit of a deep dive and looking at each of those files, working out what the commonality is, and it already sort of takes a pretty good guess at where it recognises it as a form. It recognises the commonality in the different fields, and then once that's finished, all we then simply need to do is just to go through and just briefly train it. So here we are. Here's again, it's very simple user interface, and this is an invoice. We've got balance due. We've got other sort of simple fields here. We'll just go through and go right. That's where balance due is on this invoice, and it's automatically recognised it in the other invoices, and we just simply go through.
Just a question from the Q&A section. So Inbal was asking whether or not, so how would this work for presumably forms that contain content of an indeterminate length? Look, in the example there where you've got tabular data, can you extract rows from a table competently using AI Builder, or does it get confused about that sort of stuff?
So the simple answer is yes, you can. This is functionality which recently came to AI Builder. And this is sort of a classic sort of use case where you've got this line items where it would be beneficial to extract that. So there's very much the capability to be able to extract that sort of granular sort of information that typically may be in a table.
But it's not for things like tabular structures and things like that. It's fine. But if you're going to throw a set of documents that are all drastically different in terms of their content and structure, AI Builder is not going to work in that situation. So they do have to share a fairly consistent format.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where I'd probably sort of go back to the document understanding, where it's kind of if there's less commonality and more sort of free form unstructured, then then maybe document understanding would be a better model to use. So we're just going through and finishing the training here. Trained the model, and then all we simply do, do a quick test, but all I'm going to do is just go and publish that back to the document library. If you recall, we created that document library in the HR site. It takes a few moments, and whilst that's loading up, I'll just show you another quick slide on. So there's AI Builder, it relates to Power Apps, but also very much can relate to Power Automate, as we saw in that sort of pull down. There's there is the capability to be able to extend Power Automate with AI Builder. So an action from a trigger might be do some deeper sort of text analysis. So I'm just go back to our model. Come on, do that again using SharePoint, and then. So effectively what this is doing is it's creating a Power Automate flow behind the scenes related to that SharePoint library, and then we just go back to take us back to SharePoint. Here's our library, and then all I simply do is, so this is an example PNG file, and we've uploaded it. Now this is kind of like a manual upload. Practically, a practical use case could be that this information is coming in. Maybe there's a sort of a general mailbox that all invoices get sent to, or maybe there's some other sort of trigger. And it takes a couple of moments. We can see here right now the balance due and the classification is blank. And we'll do
in this case, Andy, the flow is anchored to a document library, right? You'd have to recreate that flow for other document libraries where those purchase orders exist.
Yes,
or have them forwarded to a single document library for processing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the sort of distinguishers about a form processing model is tied to a individual document library, and as you rightly pointed out, you need to define those flows elsewhere. But anyway, what we can see here is the invoice. So the balance due has automatically been completed, and and this. And I suppose let's sort of go into sort of exploring some use cases. So for example, in this use case, it could be all invoices under a certain amount just get auto approved or just go to one level of approval as opposed to a higher amount, or maybe if we're extracting the supplier information, and maybe an invoice for one particular supplier goes to one set of people as opposed to another set of invoices. So hopefully that sort of gives you sort of a bit of an idea on how practically the two components of power or of syntax work. And I'm just going to quickly pull this slide back up here, which once again sort of reinforces that the document understanding is for unstructured file formats, and you create that from the content center, which is a SharePoint site. And that can be applied to multiple libraries. So going back to that sort of your conversation earlier, Ken, certainly sort of document understanding would be sort of, could be a better way forward there, as opposed to form processing, which is very much created within the document library and utilizes the AI builder user interface for the training. So yeah, look, I love talking to clients about kind of syntax and how it can be sort of the kind of sort of use cases. So very much sort of contracts is a very popular use case where and typically you'd use that document understanding model to extract various sort of text components, which would be in the column of the respective SharePoint library, and you can get sort of very granular with with how you sort of extract. So you can sort of say that this kind of text, you'll find it sort of generally in this sort of area, sort of after this section and before this section. And if you're extracting sort of standard kind of formats, dates and phone numbers, that's all. Or that you can very much sort of do that. Order processing. I think that's sort of a very sort of practical use case. In addition to that automation of sort of the compliance activities. So Ken, have you had sort of other sort of use cases that you've sort of explored with your clients?
Really, it's a question of, so yes, but it's about, there's an exercise underpinning this, which is to look at the digital footprint of an organization and try and group content in the way that shares similar structure, look and feel, and normally you can reel a set of content types right off the bat. But the challenge organizations have is working out where all this stuff is. And then deciding whether or not they have to bring it all together in a single container, like a document library, to make this work, or whether they can allow their platform to grow organically and just have things being classified on the fly, irrespective of how they're put in. So there's a bit of work to be done underneath that to look at what the right solution is in that case, because in many cases, the idea of having everything in a single document library is a little bit idealistic, but and you don't want to overinvest in automation behind the scenes that's just moving all this stuff around, right? I think the idea that it's anchored off content types is quite useful, because content types can also be targeted with policy, as you saw with the retention labeling and things like that. So business rules can be formed around content types, which makes it very useful. But yeah, a typical example I've kind of looked to enforce in all the organizations I've worked in is trying to elicit customer data from statements of work, so that we can slice and dice by customer name, by account manager, revenue, sector, things like that, and put together a rather nifty little solution that converts content to PDF on the fly as it's put into SharePoint using undocumented API endpoints.
Awesome.
But no, but it's not a huge undertaking for organizations to start evaluating this and start to training the models. You know, what on one hand is getting a model that works. Then you've got the challenge of rolling the model out within an organization, and I think there's nothing really to stop beyond licensing, which I've got a question about that, but beyond the licensing implications, there's nothing to stop users from evaluating this and pointing it at common content that they manage to at least learn what knowledge they can gain.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really is, as I hopefully sort of showed in the demonstrations. It's a very simple sort of quick exercise to initially sort of set up a what could be an initial proof of concept that you can sort of start evaluating automation versus your existing sort of manual.
Yeah, I think the heuristics you can point at unstructured content is actually far more interesting, because I know forms processing has been around for a while, but there are limits to what forms processing will work with. And often organizations have, as you say, like contracts or proposals or other sort of documents that have the same purpose, but might vary quite radically in terms of their look and feel. A good example is a partner organization like us will often write pre-sales material on customer paper versus our own paper, and so the template will be completely different, but the same information will be contained within, and so forms processing starts to fall down when you look at scenarios like that. Good question from Imbal again. It relates to licensing. It's like what bits are syntax versus standard functionality. I think it's a bit of a grey area, right? But syntax is most definitely a feature that is separate to SharePoint, that is licensed separately, that happens to utilize SharePoint for its user interface, right? Do you want to know more about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a great summary. I mean, firstly, to light up syntax either within the sort of the document understanding or within the form processing, you need a syntax license. With regards to form processing underpinned by AI Builder, which in itself has got this additional licensing model around sort of credits. So if you want to be utilizing the form processing, you'll also need those AI builder credits. There are next slide here. There's quite a few. Just a way of time, I won't go into these in detail, but once you've got the SharePoint syntax licensing, there's kind of sort of additional functionality you can light up. So I mentioned this concept of the content type based on a sort of a new kind of modern hub rather than a sort of a content type hub that becomes available. And another quick one around that. Similar to content types, term stores. There's been a bit of discussion in the community. You know, what's the relevance of term stores moving forward? Absolutely relevant, because you can actually utilize. Let's say, for example, the statement of work. You've got you're extracting a field which might have a number of different sort of names to it. So using the term store, you can define the sort of the definitive term you want, and then you can define sort of associated sort of synonyms. But yeah, term stores very relevant, and that's lit up with the licensing.
So with the licensing, Andy, who actually needs to be licensed? Is it the person who creates the model, or is it the person who consumes it, or both?
So yeah, both is a simple answer there. Yeah. So just sort of wrapping up with a few other sort of I suppose sort of snippets of information. There's in addition to this, there's some really good evolving documentation. So this slide here goes through in quite detail around sort of a use case, which is effectively using sort of the Microsoft Teams as the overall sort of user interface for the underlying processing via Syntax. And there's recently been a sort of a number of examples in GitHub. And those examples you deploy using the quite recent PowerShell, which is coming to, which is available via the patterns and practice. So this allows you to sort of automate some of this kind of sort of setup behind the scenes. Look, won't go to the details of everything on this roadmap, but just sort of suffice to say that this really is the sort of the I suppose the sort of the V1 of Syntax, and I think we'll see a lot more really cool sort of stuff coming to it, even more granular ways that we can sort of really sort of fine tune on the information we're extracting, opportunities to automate even further with APIs. And yeah, it's English first, but there'll be a lot of other languages coming to the service. And very much. I mean, one thing I've sort of learned in my first few months at Microsoft is this 2021 is very much going to be it's the year of Viva. And more specifically Viva topics. There's quite a lot of sort of integration opportunities between the two, and again that's underpinned by the commonality of just as I mentioned that Syntax is very much underpinned by term store and content types. It's sort of very sort of similar to with Viva topics as well.
And you and I know, Andy, that Microsoft will reevaluate and update its licensing model based on consumption. So I'm going to speculate at this point and say that there's probably going to be changes to the licensing model in the next fiscal year, just in light of what you said about bridging the gap between Syntax, Viva, packaging that up, giving it a sort of compelling market offering. What I would advise now to organizations is that you need a solid business case to license for Syntax. Simply tackling one use case around forms is not going to cut it, and unless you can sort of limit that to an individual team. So there is a free trial, and that can be utilized to explore a number of opportunities. And there's no other than time and effort internally, there's no cost to undertaking that evaluation. So that's where a lot of organizations will start, and they'll also lean on partners to advise about what the art of the possible, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, those who've got sort of partner access to demo environments, there's recently, I mean, what I was showing you with the form processing is a demo environment as a partner you've got access to, I think, for 3 months or so.
I'm kind of itching to get back into it now and start to have a play. Any closing remarks, Andy?
I'm both professionally and personally really sort of excited about what Syntax and many of the other new content services are, and just get in there and just spin up a trial and have a play.